So I was telling Mauricio that there's this one property out of all the properties I own that I self-manage, and I hate it because I hate trying to find tenants. And it's empty for the first time in about 3 years. And we had somebody walk through today, and she was great. I mean, everything about her seemed perfect. And then we got her application. And on her application, she listed an emotional support cat.
Did you not allow pets on your listing?
We do not allow pets. Well, we don't allow cats on our listing.
Well, that's your own fault for being a...
Welcome to Drunk Real Estate.
Grab a drink and enjoy the show.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 46 of Drunk Real Estate. I am Kyle Wilson, Ashley Wilson's husband, and we got us all together here. We got AJ in full focus, and we're ready to go. How's it going, AJ?
Going good, man. I just showed up and paid an astronomical amount for really crappy internet. So,
is that a real background back behind you there?
I knew you weren't in Idaho because that's a beautiful background. It's a beautiful day in Southern California. That's what you got back there.
The sun is shining and there's blue skies, so I'm not in Idaho.
What are you doing there?
So I came down to do some investor meetings. It was kind of ad hoc. I'm going to Portland to speak, and so I jumped down to LA real quick before I headed off to Portland. If I would have known I could plan better, I would have showed up with Mauricio.
Wow, Jay, I guess we don't invest enough in AJ's deals for him to just come visit us for an investor meeting. Well, we have to step up our game.
His plane would have to stop once on the way.
Oh, that's true. What are you drinking, AJ?
Water, because that's what the hotel had right here when I got here. So
wow, you couldn't room service a Diet Coke for him?
Oh, I can. It's just going to take a bit. So
he didn't have any money left over after the internet.
That's right. After I paid for the internet, I can't afford anything.
Mauricio, how's it going, man?
I'm doing good. I'm just back from daughter birthday activities. She turned 10 actually I turned yesterday. Dude, check this out. So we go to a water park yesterday, which was interesting in and of itself. But it's a water park here, not too far from where you are, AJ, called the Great Wolf Lodge Water Park. If you wanted to do a study on morbidly obese people, that is a good place to start.
We have one in Pennsylvania too. We go for like spring breaks and stuff because it's an hour and a half from us.
Holy crap. The amount of people that are out of shape. I felt like a supermodel at walking around that place. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. Gained a few pounds. Got off my cut. Saturday I had a pizza party. Sunday was the girls' parties, and then yesterday was the Great Wolf Lodge.
So at your Great Wolf Lodge, is there like an adults only cove, like where you go in and it's like no kids allowed, and there's just a bar with like a waterfall and shit?
No, there's none of that. There was the outside section that we didn't check out. Maybe there's something like that on the outside, but no, on this side there was definitely slides for the adults, but yeah, none of that stuff.
No, and the one up here, there's like an adults only section. So like we go with like a couple different couples, and then we trade off where like the guys will watch the kids for like an hour, and then the girls will watch the kids for an hour, and then we'll go deke off into the bar and the under the grotto. So it's a pretty fun time. What are you drinking?
Dude, I busted back. I wanted to finish my Woodford Reserve. Trying to keep I was going to do a little wine, but I figured I got to save the calories a little bit today. So a little Woodford Reserve, and I think I'm going to finish it off.
The perfect one night amount. Jay, what's up, man?
Hey, going well. I have been trying. Mauricio got me motivated. I've been trying to get back in shape, so I've been walking / jogging 4 miles a day, and just finished my jog a few minutes ago. So if you see me sweating here, I'm not nervous. It's just the shower wasn't enough to cool me down.
Well, that was one of your yearly predictions, right? About what Jay's weight was going to be at the end of the year. So
yeah, I've got a long way to go.
What was it? I forgot that one. What was it? Are we close? Are we going in the right direction?
I don't even remember what it was, but I can promise you we're not close.
A couple ice cream eating competitions since then. What are you drinking tonight?
So I got out of the shower. I was a little bit tired, so I decided to make myself a cup of coffee, and so I went with the Kahlua and coffee this evening. So hopefully the wife will be in a few minutes with my second cup.
Tell her to bring the Kirkland's Irish cream in too. I know you got that stashed.
So she wanted to like foam up a nice foamy Irish cream on top of the Kahlua and do a fancy thing, and I told her she didn't have to go through all the trouble.
Oh, you have the camera that can look down too, right? You would have been perfect. You could have brought it in and then like showed us a little view of her expertise. It would have been great.
What are you drinking, Kyle? What are you drinking?
So once again, I rushed in from dropping my daughter off at practice for her theater, and so I grabbed something. I just looking for something with no carbs and no sugar, and I was looking through my fridge, and I just came across this. Actually, it's called Clear. It's clear, and it says right on it, no carbs, no sugar. So I thought, hey, like I'll just give that a go. And you know what? It sounds great when you open it too. Listen to it.
No carbs, no sugar, no taste, no buzz.
Actually, that is the one. This is the water version, so it does actually just taste like water. It tastes like nothing. It's dangerous though. All right, should we get into this? Well, we are back to Bass Ackward land, where good news is bad news, because shocker, the jobs report came in with some unexpected results. Jobs number came in much softer than we expected, which sent stocks higher and the 10-year treasury lower. So figure that one out. We also had revisions to previous jobs data. And while the last month was actually revised up a little bit, which I claim is still just cover so that they can revise all the rest down. And doing so, if you go back 2 months, that revision was so low that the net of over the 2 months was actually 22,000 jobs down. So Jay, I'm tired of having to constantly point out how ridiculous these jobs reports are. So why don't you help us out on understanding what's going on here?
Yeah, so we can talk about the numbers, and I do want to talk about the numbers, but I think it's also really important that people understand like the nuances and the intricacies of where all this jobs data comes from, and because I think there's a lot of confusion out there. We have some headline numbers, but then there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes numbers that are important. So I want to talk about that. Before I talk about that, you already mentioned that the jobs numbers came out last week. So let's talk real quickly about the data that came out last week. Two headline numbers that we always seem to focus on because the media focuses on them. One, the unemployment rate, and two, the number of payroll jobs that were added. Unemployment rate ticked up to 3.9% from 3.8%. So from a historical perspective, it's still super low number, 3.9. Anything under 4% is super low. So it does indicate that we're still in a pretty tight jobs market. That said, we were at 3.4% 6 months ago. So we've ticked up a good bit since just a few months ago. So the trend is definitely up, even if the numbers.
And the Fed's prediction for the end of the year was 4.0. So we're sneaking up on that one too.
Yeah, and the Fed has kind of said that 4.0 is that magic number where once we cross it, they start thinking about lowering interest rates. And the reason for that is we tend to think about jobs or about consumer demand as being like this leading driver of inflation. But how many people are looking for work is also a driver of inflation. When nobody's looking for work, basically companies have to pay a lot more to get employees. And so when we have a tight labor market, we don't have a lot of people looking for jobs, that drives inflation. And so as we get up to 4.1, 4.2%, it's probably going to have a good impact on inflation and will probably be a signal to the Fed that things are starting to soften. So that's one number. The other number that we tend to focus on is this number of payroll jobs added. Last month in April, it was 175,000 jobs that we added. Two ways to look at 175,000 jobs. First, on the negative side, it was a whole lot lower than what was expected. We were expecting 240,000 jobs. And so came in a lot lower than anybody expected. But on the good side or the other side, relatively speaking, that number by itself is pretty strong. So if you go back to 2019, the average monthly payroll jobs added in 2019 before the pandemic was 165,000 jobs a month. And so we were at 175,000 jobs last month. So just from a relative standpoint, the number last month was still pretty strong. And while a lot of people are freaking out that number was so much less than the expected number of 240,000, it's still a really good number. And there's no reason to believe that things are necessarily slowing. It's actually going to be interesting to see. We're trending down. That number is trending down. So what does that mean? Does that mean we're heading for a soft landing? Does that mean we're flying right through a soft landing and we're heading towards a recession? Or is this just a blip and that number is going to be up again next month? We don't know. And it's going to be a couple more months before we know. And this is just one of those situations where more data doesn't necessarily mean more information. We don't really know what's going on.
We also got to figure out whether that number is going to get revised up or revised down in the next couple months, right? That could be like 101 or it could be 220.
And Jay, are you going to touch on the birth death rate adjustment too?
I'm not planning to touch on the birth death rate.
Well, then let
adjustment.
me touch on it. I'll touch all over that thing. You know what the birth death adjustment was to that number last month?
I don't even know what the birth death adjustment is.
Yeah, what does that mean? I did see that, but what does that mean?
The birth death adjustment is an estimate that they make up for that establishment survey, where they try to basically guess how many companies were created and how many companies died over the last month. And from that estimate that they figure out, they make a guess on how many jobs that added or subtracted from our economy. And so the total number that we had, the gains for last month, was 175,000, right? Do you know what the birth death adjustment was?
I do not.
303,000. So therefore, without that little estimate up, we would have had negative 125,000 jobs. So their little estimate they just threw in there.
What's the normal, like, is 303 a lot, a little? Is that like that? I don't know if you got that number in front of you and putting you on the spot there.
So it's seasonal, so it's all over the place. And if you look at it, like if you look at the BLS, like they're like, oh, sometimes it's down, sometimes it's up, but it seems to be like every time I've looked at it, it's been up recently. So I'm just saying, like, we're 175,000 versus 240. Well, they made an estimate adjustment for birth death of 300,000. So how much stock are we actually putting in this?
And here's the thing, and this is what I want to talk about tonight, because I think all of these numbers need to be taken with a grain of salt, not necessarily because there's fraud going on. There could be, and I'm guessing Mauricio and AJ will have something to say about that. But just, it's a complicated way to kind of measure the economy. And so just a few things to keep in mind. Number one, our jobs data every month comes from two sources. First, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the people who are in charge of generating this data, they poll companies on how many and what kinds of jobs those companies have added to their payroll. That's called our payroll survey. And second, they poll regular people, you and me and whoever, random people, 60,000 random people each month. And they ask them about, like, are you working? What types of jobs? How many jobs? And that's called the household survey. So we have a payroll survey and a household survey. And because those two surveys ask different questions and they use different definitions around jobs and employment, you can't reconcile the two. And so many people look and they say, okay, well, one survey says this, another survey says that. Clearly, people are making stuff up because they don't reconcile. They're not going to reconcile. They're used to provide and to create different sets of data about the job situation. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. So basically, the payroll survey tells us about the jobs that are out there. The household survey tells us about the employment status of the people who are out there. Now, digging in a little bit further, and these are a few of the things that people get really confused about when it comes to the jobs information. Number one, often we talk about people with multiple jobs and how that impacts the numbers. And it does impact the numbers. So people with multiple jobs, they're only counted once as employed or unemployed, but they can be counted multiple times on the payroll survey because they show up on multiple payrolls. So if I go from unemployed to getting, let's say, 3 part-time jobs in a month, it's only going to add one person to the employment roll. So the unemployment number is going to tick up a tiny, tiny bit, but it's going to add potentially 3 jobs to the payroll survey. So the payroll survey is going to go up a whole bunch. So you can see how those two are going to be out of whack. Let's say the next month I quit 2 of those jobs. Well, I'm still employed. I haven't gone from employed to unemployed, so it has no impact on the unemployment rate. But if I quit 2 of those jobs, we're going to see -2 most likely on the payroll survey. So again, one survey says everything's exactly the same. The other says things are worse. And so basically these definitions and the way numbers are measured means that you can't just look at one survey or the other, and you have to take everything as a whole and you have to dig in further.
And Jay, before you go, and if you want to geek out even more, even the world unemployment rate has a bazillion different definitions because there's like 4 or 5, or there might be 7 or 8. So there's like the UE4. I think that's the one that most of us use, or UE7, and each one of them have a different a sample pool of what exactly they're counting, and depending on that will dictate different numbers.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that a little bit because there's this thing called discouraged workers, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and that impacts like the different employment numbers. And we go with a thing when you hear the headline numbers, it's this thing called U6 or the unemployment 6 numbers, but there's also U5 and U4 and U3, and they're all measuring different things. And again, depending on how you want to slice and dice it, you can kind of interpret what you want from this. But here's another. So let's talk about that discouraged worker thing real quick, since you brought it up. So when someone's been out of work for at least 4 weeks, they've stopped looking for a job. Basically, they've said, I can't find anything. I give up. They get put into this category called discouraged worker. And discouraged workers are not considered employed. They're also not considered unemployed. They're just considered out of the labor force, and they're counted separately. And so if, for example, if every unemployed person, so however many million people are unemployed right now, suddenly got so pessimistic about finding a job that they said, we give up, we're not looking anymore, all those people would go into the discouraged workers category, and the unemployment rate, because none of them are considered unemployed at that point, would go to 0. So in theory, I mean, not reasonably ever happen, but in theory, we could have a 0% unemployment rate and still have millions of people out of work. They've just completely given up on trying to find a job. So it's always really important to look at this discouraged workers number to see if that's impacting the unemployment rate. And that's where the U4 number comes in, and I think the U5 number as well. And so again, we have to be looking at all of these things. And then the third one I really want to mention, because this is another one that people get confused about a lot, is self-employment. And so there's 2 types of self-employed people. There's self-employed people that own companies, people like us. We have companies, we have employees. We get counted in the payroll survey. We do get counted as employed, but I'm talking about the other type of self-employed. Think of it as gig workers. So people that drive for Uber or do Etsy or DoorDash, all those people that are, again, gig workers. They're self-employed. They're working as 1099 contractors for some other company. They count towards employed or unemployed. And so Uber alone has, I think, 1.5 million drivers. So that means there's a whole lot of jobs that depend on Uber and the people who are driving for Uber. But consider that nearly 70%, this number, when I came across this number, I was doing research earlier today, nearly 70% of all Uber drivers don't make it more than 6 months. They realize, I guess, that it's not a great way to make money, or they're losing money, or they find something better, whatever it is. So that means of that 1.5 million people that are driving for Uber right now today, 70% of them don't really have a good job. Like, they're going to be out of Uber in the next 6 months. They're going to be doing something else. So should we even be considering them employed? Like that?
Well, they probably have 3 other jobs that they're doing too.
I was going to say most of those guys probably also are not exclusively Uber drivers. That's probably their second or third job. That is the second or third job. They probably have a full-time job.
Yeah, they're selling on eBay or Amazon, or
I get people delivering packages to me like at 5 a.m. because they're obviously getting all that work in before they start their regular 9 to 5, and same on the other end too.
Yep. And the number of Uber drives and Lyft drives, the number of deliveries from DoorDash and Postmates and all those other services is going through the roof. And so there are a lot more people who are driving for those services every month. And again, if 70% of them don't last 6 months, it's really going to distort what the actual unemployment rate is today, because a lot of those people, we call them employed because they're driving today, but they're not necessarily making any money. And here's the other thing that makes this really difficult, because we had this gig economy today, and we're looking at all these numbers using the same metrics, the same data, the same surveys pretty much that we have had since 1979, I think it was. It makes it really tough to compare all the numbers today to what we were seeing, let's say back in 2006 or 7 or 8, leading up to the Great Recession. We can't compare the two and say, do we see similarities? Do we see differences? Because we didn't have those types of employment back then to the same degree we have today. And then here's another thing. Somebody else brought this up, and I haven't really thought about this or dug into how this could impact it, but I'll throw it out because I have a feeling it'll be a good talking point. With all the gig work, a lot of times, a lot of those gig workers are undocumented. And so we have a lot of undocumented workers who otherwise, if they were in the labor force working for a company on payroll, they'd be counted because they'd be on payroll. But if they're driving, we don't necessarily know if they're documented or undocumented. And so it's very possible that we have a much larger pool of people who are in our unemployment numbers than we had in the past, because a lot of undocumented people can come in and get these gig jobs, and we don't know about them. And so we don't know what that denominator is for the labor force when we're calculating the unemployment rate. So again, I haven't thought a lot about that, but I thought that was an interesting point that somebody made. So yeah, go ahead, beat me up.
No, I was going to say one other factor that kind of, I don't say skews the numbers, but obviously has an effect numbers. And I think, Kyle, you've brought this up before, and I think it's one of the reasons why this number was lower than usual. Part of that number includes government jobs, right? And so my understanding from this report, like usually they get 30 to 40,000, additional. I think that's because I was looking at these numbers in the prior reports, and this month I believe we only got about 8,000 or 9,000 government jobs.
Well, and that was 8,000 of direct government jobs, but there were still 87,000 of the 175,000 were healthcare. So like over half every month is directly towards government spending. It's not necessarily just government jobs, but you're right. Like I think the previous month it was 55,000 just government workers were added, and so like. It's tough for us to have a bad jobs report when half of these jobs are just directly tied towards government spending, which government spending has nothing to do with interest rates, has nothing to do with what else is going on in the economy. They're just going to spend the money.
It's true, but there are a significant number of those jobs, at least the last 2 months, that were in the manufacturing sector, which is a good indication that our economy is still moving along. I mean, that's where you want to see the jobs in a healthy economy. You want to see them in manufacturing. And so, yeah, I mean, we're always going to have a lot of government jobs. I mean, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, regardless of who's president. But you have to look outside of that number and see where else we're growing. And healthcare has been huge for the last year or two. Education's been huge for the last year or two. And luckily, manufacturing is still pretty strong.
Business services is down.
Yeah, and we're not the only ones. You'll like this stat. Jay and I were talking about this a little bit offline, but we're not the only ones that kind of beat up these numbers every so often. I didn't realize this, but I guess I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but the Philadelphia Federal Reserve in Philadelphia, they tend to beat up on the BLS quite a bit. There was an article that I pulled up from 2022 saying that back in 2022, the Philadelphia Fed had accused, I don't know if accused is the right word, but at least challenged the BLS that they had overstated jobs by over 1 million jobs in a particular quarter. That was back in 2022. And just recently they did it again. They just released a report in March saying that they believe that the BLS overstated jobs in 2023 for the whole year by 800,000 jobs. So the Fed in Philadelphia that's trying to get a clearer picture of what's going on seems to be disagreeing as well with the BLS numbers, and it actually forced the BLS
necessarily
to come out.
Blame the BLS. Like I feel like a lot of it's like crap in, crap out, right? Like they're doing these surveys and they're only getting a 30% response rate on these things, and then they have to use these numbers to extrapolate, and then numbers trickle in afterwards. So that's why they have to revise all these things. And like you said about comparing the two surveys, Jay, so the establishment survey was the one with 175,000 jobs added. Well, if you take the household survey that calls households, well, they think it was only 25,000 jobs added. So like, it's just showing you like these are based off of surveys. And I don't know if you guys have ever met. I've never met a single person who's been called. Yet to this day, like somebody comment down below if they have been called by the BLS or one of these job surveys, because I have yet to meet a single person who has been called to ask about whether they're hiring, whether they're looking for work, like either side of it, establishment or household.
Let's so just to put that into context, it's 60,000 people called a month. So what is that? That's one in about 5,000 chance of you being called every month. That's pretty low. So
yeah, I mean, but then extrapolate how many people you know, and people who I know. So like I know Mauricio, and Mauricio knows other people. Like the 6 degrees away, we should know somebody who's been called by one of these surveys.
I'm gonna do a poll. I'm gonna do a poll on social media. In fact, if you guys drop a comment, if you've ever been contacted, but let's do a poll and we'll release the results next week. But you're right, it's because it's 5,000 every single month. So in a particular year, or in the last 20 years, what are your odds of getting called in the last 25 years, Jay?
Hey, Kyle, how often do you answer the phone if you don't recognize the number?
They always leave a message, Jay.
I'm not sure they do. That's the thing.
You think they would just move on and like not try and call me again? Like if I get called multiple times, I'll pick up and be like, "What? Why are you calling me?"
So if they call though at 2:00 in the afternoon, and all the people working don't answer the phone, but all the people that aren't working answer the phone because they have time.
Right. Who are the types of people that are likely to answer their call? I mean, older people who like are used to talking on the phone. You call a 22-year-old millennial, or they call millennials or Gen Z plus. I don't even know what they're called. Gen
Slackers.
Z. I mean, are they going to? They're like, my phone's ringing. What does this mean?
Well, and my thing about this survey too is if you see all of a sudden the BLS is called and like your company's not doing very well and you're firing people, like are you really going to want to talk to the BLS about like how your company's not doing well? Or if you just lost your job, are you really going to want to tell the BLS about it? Like I feel like the people who are not doing well are more likely to be the ones who don't pick up the phone and want to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, as long as I'm talking about digging into the data, I do want to mention two things because we have those headline numbers. We have the unemployment rate and we have the number of payroll jobs added, which again doesn't really tell us anything. It's a snapshot in time. But two things that do end up or tend to be leading indicators that I like to look at. One that I've liked to look at for a long time, and one I just kind of got familiar with in the last couple months. The first is average number of hours. So if you look at the average number of hours that are being worked every month, as that number goes down, tends to be a leading indicator that we're heading towards recession. So it's basically companies saying, hey, we're not yet ready to lay off, but we don't want to pay as much. We're taking more part-time people. We're cutting some full-time people to drop the average. We're hiring maybe more part-time people. And so as you see average number of hours go down, typically that's a good indication that we're heading towards recession. Over the last 2 years, we saw a big trend down from like 37 hours to 34, 33 hours. It's been flat for the last couple months, but we've definitely seen a big trend down over the last 2 years. And so that's one indication that we may be heading towards recession, just that leading indicator. The second one is this thing, and I just read about it a couple months ago, and I was thinking about it today. I hadn't really looked at it or thought about it until today when I realized I was going to be doing the segment, but there's something called the Somm rule, and it's named after a woman, I think Susan Somm, maybe, don't quote me on that, but basically she theorized that one of the best leading indicators historically for recession is to look at the 3-month trending average for the unemployment rate. So right now, unemployment rate was 3.9, 3.8, 3.9. So we're somewhere between 3.8 and 3.9 as the 3-month trending average, moving average for unemployment. Compare that to the lowest 3-month moving average over the past 12 months, which I believe is around 3.5%. Like the end of last summer, we saw 3 months that averaged about 3.5%. And anytime you see that the current 3-month trending average is more than a half point or a half point or more above the lowest 3-month trending average, that's a sign that we are almost certainly heading into recession. So, and that's a really interesting data point, because what that says is it doesn't matter how low the unemployment rate is. What matters is how much it's bumped up since it hit its lowest point. And so right now, if we got to like 4.0 or 4.1 for a month or two, we'd probably be about a half point above the lowest point over the last 12 months. And so that would be an indication that we could be heading towards recession. So it's just something to look at, because it's been a reliable leading indicator.
Let's give her some credit. Her name is Claudia.
Claudia Somm. I'm sorry, Claudia.
I got one more cool indicator of a potential recession here, where shout out to Pensford. I got this chart from them. And so this, if you're not seeing this on YouTube, it's the number of people moving from not in the labor force into unemployment. So to Jay's point, like there's people who are not employed, but they're not looking for work. So they're not counted in the unemployment rate. Well, this is a chart showing people who have historically not been counted as unemployment all of a sudden are now looking for work and they have to be counted. And if you look back at the previous 4 recessions, every single time that number has started to spike right when the recession happened. And if you look at where we are right now, that number is starting to head up and it's heading in that direction. So by this graph, that would indicate that we are either already in a recession or we're about to have that happen. So that's just another data point that to add to your calendar of potential indicators.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I like that chart right there.
All right, AJ, you got any things to wrap this up before we move on?
I think there's a few things on the overall job market that we're looking at. Obviously, there's all of these different measurements. There's all of these different ways to look at it. At the end of the day, all we're doing is trying to show trends, right? And that's kind of what you were just talking about, Kyle. It's like there's this phase, right? There's this process that people go through. How we collect the data is a trailing thing, and we're looking at those averages moving forward. And that is why jobs data, especially when there's big changes, mean a lot to the markets, because is this a shift in the overall momentum? Is this a shift in the overall direction that we've seen jobs headed? Because that means that in a year, it could be much, much lower, right? So if all of a sudden we said the jobs have shifted and we're going into a phase of the economy of unemployment and high unemployment, that would scare the market, because then they go, okay, we don't know where things necessarily are going. Are they going down? How far will that go? So a lot of the market is looking at these trend lines. They're looking at the shift. They're trying to find out, all right, where is this headed? Has it begun? Does this mean that less jobs, less demand, less product sales, recession, right? So that is the big thing that people are looking. The individual numbers are always readjusted. How much they really matter or even mean is way less important than the trend. And if it signals a shift in the overall labor market, and that's really what's important.
Yeah, 100%. And that reminds me, that point about the trend, and you say that it doesn't matter, like the revisions. And I would agree, it mostly doesn't matter except for the trend. But it did remind me of one more data point, and I'm not going to call this a leading indicator because I don't think there's enough historical data. But in 2023, 11 out of 12 months were revised down after the original numbers came out. There's only been one other time where 11 out of 12 months in a row were revised down, and that was back in 2007.
In communist Russia or China?
What?
I'm just saying.
What's the argument? Why is that? What does that tell you that they're revising all these numbers down versus, I mean, they're overstating. All that means is they're overstating.
That they want to make it look better than it is. So because everyone only talks about headlines. And so when the headline number comes out, then everyone makes a comment and the markets react on that. And then all of a sudden the revision gets put on page 6. So it doesn't move the markets at all.
So I'm not going to say that's untrue. I mean, if the Philadelphia Fed is calling out the BLS for distorting,
I said, go birds.
Go birds. If the Philadelphia Fed's calling out the BLS, I'm certainly not going to say I know better. But there is reason to believe that you're going to see more revisions down when we're trending down in a jobs market, because revisions down tend to be data that comes in later. And maybe it goes back. I don't know exactly why data is coming in later. Maybe it's exactly what you're saying, Kyle. People you leave messages and they call you back 2 weeks later. But revisions tend to be data that's not had at the time the original information is put out, the original data is put out. And so if things are trending down, if things are getting worse, you would expect the revisions to go down simply because later data is going to be worse than earlier data. And so, I don't know if it means anything. I'm not saying it means anything. I just thought it was an interesting data point that what we saw in 2023 has only happened once before, and it was right before the Great Recession.
Was it also an election year? I guess
I don't know. Did you guys watch Powell last time when he was asked about that? He got legit angry. Like he was the implication that Powell was going to be influenced by the fact that there was an election to his decisions on whether or not to raise or to raise rates or bring down rates. Like he legit got angry about it, which makes me think that like he might actually make a move like right before the election. Like he got so angry that he like, it's almost like on principle, he might do it.
We don't have to go off on this tangent, but it's always important to remember that that the Fed controls monetary policy. They control interest rates, and they have a big impact on inflation, if not the biggest impact on inflation of any other organization out there. But the federal government, the president, Congress, they control fiscal policy, and they decide on spending. They decide on helicoptering money in certain situations. And so they can have a huge impact on inflation as well. And when the federal government wants to print lots of money and give away money, that's going to lead to inflation, and that's going to go against the mandate of the Fed. And so in a lot of ways, the Fed and the federal government are at odds when it comes to what they're trying to accomplish.
And a lot of times they also have to have some joint cooperation, because especially like during COVID was a great example. Like, the government may want to print all this government debt, but somebody's got to buy it. And if the Fed isn't there to agree to buy it and print and do that thing, and then it may not work. But yeah, no, I hear you.
Just pointing out.
We also have QT still going too now. But what I'm interested in seeing, so we're at 3.9 now, right? Unemployment. I want to see once that first 4 handle comes on unemployment, once we hit over that 4.0 threshold, I want to see what the reaction is, because we haven't had a very good track record of keeping a calm head when things come out different than we expect on these reports. And like, I feel like that 4 handle is just like that mental barrier that once we go over that, there might be like pandemonium in the streets.
Well, this isn't a topic for today, and it's probably more technical than we want to talk about on this show. But you talk about QT, quantitative tightening, continuing. But if you factor in everything, including reverse repos, which is basically the Fed giving very cheap money to lending institutions over short periods of time, you can argue that we're not really in QT. That there's still enough reverse repo money out there that we're still in stimulus mode. So,
well,
but
reverse repo is paying pretty good rate right now. So it's not a bad move by the banks. All right, should we move on?
Let's do it.
We good? So we had this discussion before. Are we bleeping swear words, or like are we? Is it something that like we could just swear and we're gonna let it go, or like?
I put it this way: unless it's gratuitous, I don't ask the editor to edit anything. We try and keep them out of the intros, but other than that, go for it.
But if I'm like, okay, then title of the next segment is Florida fucked? Is that something we should bleep?
I will not bleep that because I think that's a very valid question to be asked.
It has a nice ring to it though. Like,
and so if my response is fuck yeah, then we're gonna keep that in there.
Yeah. I feel like it has a nice ring to it. So like,
I'll allow it.
Well, Jay, you've been trying to get Ashley and I to move to Florida for years now, and it seems like it's a pretty good thing that we didn't, because according to CNBC and the latest Redfin data, the number of homes for sale in Florida has surged after home buyers are rushing to accommodate, home builders are rushing to accommodate newcomers. But there was more than 5,600 active listings in Florida that included the keyword motivated. So with inventories of for sale is shooting up and prices of shooting down, Mauricio, many people are wondering, is this the canary in the coal mine for the entire market? Or is this just kind of a local, Florida thing? Because Florida is kind of its own little country down there.
I know, and I feel bad because I see Jay's already smiling over here. For those of you who don't know, Jay is a resident of South Florida, down there in Sarasota, which is almost at the heart, not quite the heart, but basically the heart of where a lot of these articles are happening.
That was on the list. When you look at the list of when people are saying like, oh, which areas are getting hit the hardest, Sarasota was right up there.
Yeah, Sarasota, and the little north of that is Bradenton, just Tampa, like all along the west side. I guess it's the Gulf. I don't want to misspeak, Jay. It's called the Gulf side as opposed to the West Coast side. The Gulf side, and all the way up to Cape Coral and North Point. Yeah, the inventory has really skyrocketed over the last. Actually, this one was the last month. This caught my eye a couple months ago. And look, it's a little bit of a self-serving article to me because you can always have this echo chamber and you can always anything that comes out to support your position. So, and I know Jay's got a lot to say about this, but I think it illustrates an interesting point. So let's go through the data a little bit. The inventory has really the bottom line is that inventory has skyrocketed in South Florida, right? Whether it's 50%. And by the way, in other states too. So Texas is also, some areas of Texas outside of Dallas is having some similar issues in terms of inventory going up. And what's interesting is we've always been hearing the argument like, well, inventory is really tight. It's like there's a lot of demand. There's not enough supply. Nobody's going to move. Interest rates are so low. Like why, that whole thing. And here we have, statistics in Florida that are showing that inventories are starting to not only creep up, go up significantly. The asking prices of these homes that are on the market are starting to come down. They're slashing. I don't know if slashing is the right word, but they're cutting pricing. The days on market are skyrocketing. Of the 10 biggest increases in inventory, 6 of them are in Florida and 2 of them are in Texas. So those are the 2 states that are really getting hammered. And one of the main reasons you brought it up, Kyle, is the fact that because of all the migration of these states, there's a lot of builders that have been building quite a bit of inventory. They're really adding a lot of supply to the market, and they're having to give a lot of concessions because they probably overbuilt a little bit, and they're really having to entice people to buy their product with some pretty amazing concessions. But the point, I think, that a lot of these articles, if you read them, a lot of these articles reference all of the other factors that go into these decisions of having people, literally the demand for these products going down, because everybody talks about the low mortgage rates, right? We have whatever the percentage of people have mortgages under 3% and 4% and 5%. But people always forget that there are other factors involved in home ownership. And that's what a lot of these reports are really highlighting, which is, especially in Florida, there's a lot of these condos, a lot of these houses that have HOA fees. A lot of these HOA communities have assessments that are coming due. We've talked about property insurance, obviously skyrocketing. That's one of the unique issues that I know Florida is having. I think the average insurance premium is now going up to above $10,000, sometimes $12,000 a year, when I think the average nationwide is about $2,000 or $2,500. So you're literally paying 5 or 6x more in property insurance. So people are going to Florida thinking they're going to get a great deal, and then they realize, holy crap, my property insurance monthly bill is pretty high. Property taxes, obviously. And again, a lot of people are getting priced out of the market. A lot of the locals are saying that Florida just doesn't have that same allure it did 5 or 10 years ago, where like, hey, things are expensive in California, things are expensive in New York. Why don't we go down to Florida where everything's more economical? It turns out people are now starting to look at North Carolina and Tennessee as other states that may be a little bit more attractive because the prices have gotten to the point where they're a little too high. One of the things I thought was really almost shocking, I think I saw, again, these are just surveys. I'm sure this is not going to actually happen, but they did a survey where they said that 12%, which seemed really high, 12% of Floridians had contemplated leaving the state next year because of the high cost of living there, and they were going to go to other locations. And so it's starting to, I don't know if I know there's a lot of migration going on, but the migration is starting to stall a little bit in Florida and other markets like Texas. There's an old saying in economics, the cure for high prices is high prices. And maybe we're getting to that point where the prices have gone to the point where the demand just can't be sustained. Everybody keeps talking about raising rents. We've talked about this on the show. That's a big thing for me, where there's a limit to how much you can raise rents. At some point, people either can't afford it, they have to start bunking up with roommates, or in this case, sounds like a lot of these folks are going to be leaving the state of Florida to go to cheaper places. And remember, Florida's always been sort of this retiree place, right? When you're retired, you're on a fixed income, you move down to Florida because of the weather and all the other great stuff. But again, the point that I really wanted to underscore this before I turn it over to you guys is that mortgage rates and mortgage expense is not the only expense, obviously, that somebody who's a homeowner has. And these other things like insurance, taxes, HOA fees, and just overall maintenance do play a role in that. And if that starts going up due to inflation or for any other reasons, then that can cause people to try and bail on the market irregardless of their low interest rate. So Jay, you're obviously in the heart of that. I know you've got a lot of property in Florida, and you're in the thick of it. So obviously interested in your take on that.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of property in Florida. We sold a lot of the property in Florida. We have 5 or 6 rentals left. And just as a data point, and I agree with everything you said, I'm not going to argue that one data point proves anything, but it is very in line with everything you said and everything we're seeing. But we've sold literally hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of houses over the past 15 years. And we're in the middle of trying to sell this house it's been going on 6 months now. It's probably the hardest house we've ever had to sell. and we started it. I think we listed at 265. And we're now down to 225, and we're negotiating an offer at a good bit lower than that right now. And I'm doing that thing that I always tell people not to do, and it's kind of like trying to catch a falling knife. I'm running the prices down. And so, yeah, it's definitely bad down here because this same market, as you said, just 6 months ago was red hot. And I think a lot of it has to do, so there's Sarasota, and then there's a few counties south of Sarasota. The few counties south of Sarasota, so Charlotte County and Lee County, and they got hit by some hurricanes over the last couple of years. And so I think I speak for a lot of property owners. We got rezoned into flood zones. So FEMA came in and said large swaths of property are now in flood zones, which means we now have to get, in addition to our soaring dwelling property insurance costs, we now have to get flood insurance, which is ridiculously expensive. And so for a lot of my single family rentals, which are in the $150,000 to $300,000 range, I'm paying $6,000-$7,000 a year in property insurance. And so if I were to sell that property to somebody who's coming in and paying potentially $1,200 a month in mortgage is going to be paying another $600 a month just in insurance. That doesn't include property taxes and maintenance and all the other costs. And so, so insurance has been a huge driver of people leaving or not coming and not having a lot of demand for property in those areas. In Sarasota, and I think I speak for Tampa, Sarasota, I'm part of a number of Facebook groups of people who just live in the area. And the common theme is cost of living has gotten so expensive. And whether it's restaurants, whether it's food, whether it's gas, in addition to obviously the housing prices, has gotten so bad that a lot of people who are native, people who have been here for 30, 40, 60 years, can no longer afford to stay, and they're leaving the state. A lot of people who came during the pandemic. We have a lot of people here from the Midwest and the Northeast who came down, and they love it here, but it's just gotten too expensive and they're starting to leave. And so I think it's a lot of factors all coming together. But at the heart of it, it's rising costs. And so people have decided that the allure of Florida, and there's certainly some nice things about Florida. It's a beautiful place to live with great weather. It may not be worth it for the high cost of living.
You say great weather. Do you put those in quotation marks, or is that a great weather?
It's great weather about 9 months out of the year.
So a lot of people are asking in our community, is this have anything to do with investors? So is this, like, Florida was talked about in years past about, oh, this is a great place for investors to go, and a lot of investors flocked to certain areas in Florida. Is this a case where, you know, all of these expenses that you're talking about, insurance, even taxes have gone up significantly, interest rates, they're all just making these investments that people came down and put money into, they're no longer cash flowing, and so they're trying to get out? Or is that just a small drop in the bucket?
I think supply is less of an issue here. I mean, we do have more supply than we've had over the last couple of years. Supply is in the counties that I mentioned are approaching 5, 6, and sometimes more than 6 months. But 5-6 months is a kind of an average amount of supply. I think the big issue is that demand has dropped off a cliff. We don't have as many people moving here. We don't have as many people who are interested in buying because it's just not cost effective to buy. And the flip side of that, and this is a little off topic here, but rental costs here are absolutely atrocious, like through the roof. And so, but we're starting to see a lot of softening in rents as well. So I think it's, yes, new construction and developers have impacted a lot because a lot of the inventory that's selling these days is new construction. But I don't think it's existing investors that are driving a lot of it.
What about Chinese investors? I don't want to get political here, but it wasn't that long ago that they all of a sudden restricted any Chinese born or Chinese national from purchasing any land in certain areas of Florida. And we know that Chinese are big investors in the U.S. housing market. And the timing is just pretty inconvenient for that.
Yeah, I don't have the data. But again, I think it's not just a lot of supply. I think there's reduced demand that's contributing. And so regardless of whether there were a lot of investors or not. There's just not enough buyers anymore.
Plus, you get all the California people that move to Florida and then realize how humid and the weather isn't as great, and so then they say, "Well, if I'm gonna pay these prices, I might as well move to North Carolina or Tennessee. If it's humid over there, I might as well enjoy the weather there."
So Jay's trying to say that he doesn't think this is just supply, but I just threw up a graph here that says the 1 year change in active housing inventory for sale, and if you look, it shows a percentage on every single state here, and I think there's one other state that's at 33% is the highest. Most states are kind of in the teens and the 20s, but then if you look all the way down in Florida at the bottom, it has its own actual color that no other state is the color, because it's at 57%. So the active housing inventory change from March 2023 to 2024 is 57%. So I would say that's a supply issue, isn't it?
So not necessarily, because the supply here was literally so low that a 50% change increase in supply, I would argue, doesn't put it even close to where a lot of other states are right now. I mean, we were literally under a month and a half of inventory for much of 2023 in a couple of the counties around me.
Well, so then the next question is this just a reset? Because I think I saw a stat that from 2019 to 2024, Florida had it was like a 65% run up in housing prices, went from a median house price of $250,000 up to over $400,000. So if you look at that, like a correction of 20, even 30% is kind of just bring us even in the direction of where we were before.
Doesn't surprise me. This isn't, I mean, given the run up that we've had, I've been here since 2019, given the run up that I've seen in the last 5 years, a 20 to 30% correction, I think is not unreasonable. And again, one of the biggest contributing factors is insurance costs. We've had a lot of insurance providers leave the state. And the question is, and we've talked about this on this show, what's the solution to that? So is the government going to step in and do something about it? Is supply and demand going to take effect and capitalism will solve all the problems? Or is there going to be some big issue for a long time where we just have really high insurance costs and that's going to drive values down? Yeah.
And the real question, I think, which I'm really interested in the answer is this just a microcosm? Can you extrapolate this to the rest of the country? Is this just sort of the epicenter? Is this the beginning of, not the beginning of the end, but is this the beginning you're going to start seeing this? We're talking about Texas as well. So is this like the next couple of months? Do we see Texas having this issue? And then do we see other states having more and more issues? Or is this really something that's unique to Florida because of the insurance, because of the the big run up, that probably more run up, to your point, of any other state, the low inventory compared to every other state? What are your guys' thoughts on whether this is sort of a little leading indicator?
I would say yes. Like based on everything that I saw, like there was way too many lists like the ones I just showed you, where Florida was right at the top as far as the affected changes, the run up in the prices over the last 4 years. There's just way too many things that they're right at the top of the list for me to think that there's a systemic risk across the country. Are there going to be similar issues in other pockets? Yes. Like if you bring up Texas, like if you look at Austin's going to have similar issues. Austin had the same kind of run up, had the same kind of whiplash oversupply. They're going to have a similar issue. But if you want to say statewide, like Austin's a lot different than San Antonio. So like I don't know for sure, but if I had to place a guess on it, I would say this is more of a Florida localized thing.
Well, I agree. And I think, one of the ways we can look at this is if you look at the states that had similar run up in housing prices. Okay. So you had Florida, Texas, right? But then you had other states versus like Idaho. We have not seen, and two, ours as for an income. So housing prices to income was actually much higher than Florida. We have not seen that. In fact, as it showed on there, our listings were only up 1%, one of the lowest in the entire United States. Now, that doesn't mean it's not because people are moving there more than they are Florida. That's not it at all. In fact, I'd probably argue that it's less. I think
this is Idaho, right?
Yes, that's because there's no supply or there's nobody's building. So Florida and Texas, when you look at the supply coming on board, I mean, it was way more than those other states. Like home builders were building at mass in those areas. They were not doing that in places like Idaho. And so then once you saw interest rates rise and demand cratered, right, then the places that had lots of new supply, then they had issues, right? So Idaho, we didn't have lots of new supply. So we haven't really seen nearly as much as an impact as other states. And I think that's very similar to Utah. So Utah was the same way. It had the housing prices run up, everything else, but there's land issues, there's developer issues. We don't have as big as developers, as big as planned communities. Land costs more. We have to deal with the mountains. We have the geography of it, right? Where Florida and Texas is primed to build. They have lots of home builders. They have land that they can do it on, right? And they have huge population bases, unlike Utah and Idaho. So they can build large communities and not have to worry about it. So looking at similar states that had run up in prices and demand and issues, they do not have the similar, they're not having the similar inventory going onto the market today.
You agree, Mauricio, or what's your thought?
No, I was just going to kind of just throw out another statistic, kind of figuring out this like extrapolation thing. But I saw something from Freddie Mac that it came out specifically again on Florida that they were anticipating, I think not too long ago, they were anticipating, 2024 and 2025, they were anticipating 2.5% and 2.1% growth in property values. And they now downgraded that to just 0.5% from that 2.5 and 2.1. And I'm just kind of wondering whether that's going to be something that's nationwide, that we're going to start seeing a little bit more of leveling off or a decline. And I think for me, I just going back to the main point that I really wanted to bring up, that everyone keeps arguing about these low mortgage rates, but there are a bunch of other factors that can go into whether inventory is tight or not. It doesn't have to be limited to mortgage, whether that's somebody getting unemployed. I've always argued that one is a big one. But obviously, there's a bunch of other factors that dictate the cost of ownership. It's just not mortgage. You could own the property outright. That doesn't mean you're not paying any maintenance costs on the property, obviously.
I couldn't find anything to support this, but I figured there's got to be something with Florida and how many condos there are. Like, with the condos fees, or like whenever you have these assessments and insurance and things like that, those condo fees go up significantly to the point where like they're as much as your rent payments or your mortgage payments. And like, I know in our area, with the condos in our area, like even when house prices go up, those condos don't go up much because the cost of the HOA fees brings them down. And so the prevalence of these condos, because they're very common and prevalent, especially in the coastal cities in Florida, that's got to have some effect too. But I couldn't find anything that.
No, I definitely saw a lot of. I did see some of these videos from local real estate agents there, and that was a big one on the condos, because not only the HOA fees, but obviously the assessments. Like to your point, they were literally adding. And again, an assessment is a one-time. We need to go fix the roof or the tennis court or whatever. But yeah, these HOA fees, man, I'm telling you, like, especially in Florida where you have all these, some of them have golf courses and tennis courts and 5 swimming pools and all this stuff. Like my sister, just to tell you something in California, which is a little bit different, but like my sister, her HOA fees are like $700 a month. Like that's like a mortgage payment in some place. And she doesn't have anything. It's like just a couple of ponds. I mean, there's no tennis courts there's pools for sure, but it's just HOA fees are just a huge ordeal. And in a place like Florida, I think it just kind of is more than, like, I can't imagine HOA fees in Idaho are really that high compared to Naples or, South Florida, other South Florida places.
Yeah, it's a little bit outside the scope of this discussion, but worth mentioning that there have been a lot of issues with construction in Florida over the last 30, 40, 50 years. So just one of the big issues is with the roofs. So we have a lot of tile roofs here that in theory should be lasting 40, 50 years and these days are typically, because they were installed incorrectly for several decades, need to be replaced after 20, 25 years. A lot of insurance carriers are coming in and basically saying, if you have a roof that is over 20 years old or 25 years old, we're not going to insure the house. We've had insurers here that say if a roof is over 10 years old, and again, these are roofs that should last 40 or 50 years and that can cost 50 or 100K to replace, the insurance company is saying we're not going to insure your property. Personally, I have an insurer that agreed to insure my property with a 26-year-old roof, but the roof is basically not insured. So they won't pay to replace it if something happens. And so that's been a big issue. And it's not just roofs. There's a lot of substandard construction materials and substandard construction practices over the last 40 or 50 years that are contributing to a lot of properties that were built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that are deteriorating faster than they should. And that's contributing to these assessments and high HOA fees that we're seeing around the state.
So, Jay, it sounds like you agree that this could be a localized thing to Florida, not necessarily an indicator of a systemic issue countrywide.
I think that there are certainly factors here that are going to apply to some other states, migration being the big one. So I could see like Texas, Arizona, and some other places that had huge run up in population having these issues. Not necessarily. I mean, Texas, maybe people aren't going to want to leave. Maybe Arizona people aren't going to want to leave. But I could see that any place that had a huge run up in population over the last couple of years is at risk of something like this happening. And then certainly Texas has some of the same insurance issues that Florida has. So I think that's a risk in Texas as well. But I don't think that this is going to be necessarily reflective or representative of what's going to happen around the rest of the country.
And some of these surveys you got to obviously treat with a grain of salt. I mean, I was a little surprised. I said 12% of Floridians were thinking about leaving, but I just pulled it up. But in California, 40% of Californians are thinking about leaving, but they don't leave. It's like they're thinking about it, but at the end of the day, a small percentage end up leaving. So I'm sure it's the same as Florida.
Quite a few Californians are taking off.
Not a small percentage.
Not from a percentage standpoint.
They're all going to Boise.
All right. Any final thoughts, Mauricio, since this was your topic, or should we move on to the top 10?
Oh my God. Maybe I need to talk for another 20 minutes so that we can avoid the top 10. I mean, I come up and I'll do a little filibuster. How about that?
No, this is a fun one, guys. So we're talking about Florida. So whenever you talk Florida, you always got to think of Disney, right? So I thought it would be cool to go through.
No, I think of California. I think of Disney.
Well, are we going to get in that debate? The Florida one's better. The top 10 Disney characters based on their impact on pop culture. So I'll go through the 10 through 5, and then I'll see if you guys can guess after that. So number 10, sneaking in, Cinderella. Number 9 is the only one that I was really surprised about, is Flynn Rider from Tangled. I know my daughters watched that show, but apparently I didn't realize that guy was so influential that he made the top 10. Number 8, Timon and Pumbaa. They lump them together. Apparently they come as a package deal, even in everything. So they're number 8. Number 7, Cruella, the only evil character to make the list. Number 6, Simba from The Lion King. And then number 5, Sebastian from The Little Mermaid. All right. So then any guesses? Top 4. Who we got?
Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy.
So we got number 1 is obviously Mickey. Number 3, Donald Duck. Number 4, Goofy. But you're missing number 2.
Minnie is not number 2.
Minnie is not number 2. It seems like it was a bit of a sexist list. There was only 2 women on the list.
I don't think I know any other characters.
Are these Frozen characters? Isn't Frozen Disney?
Frozen is Disney. Frozen did not make the list.
Then we have like Elsa. Like Elsa's got to be on there or something. I don't know.
No, apparently not enough. She's probably too new to have the generational impact of.
So there's a character higher than Donald and Goofy, but it's not Minnie.
Pluto.
Pluto?
Nope. It is Genie from Aladdin.
Genie.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good character. That was Robin Williams at his finest. That was I don't know if you remember the uproar, and actually Will Smith ended up doing a decent job, but the uproar that just anybody could try and step into Robin Williams' shoes and play Genie, like that was monumental. So I think that was just a testament to how good of a job he did and how influential he was. But there you go. Top 10 Disney characters based on impact of pop culture. Probably the most influential or the informational topic we've had all night.
I think Minnie got screwed there.
Wow, that's you got to think about the times back then.
It's such a sexist report. That's what it is.
Yep.
Well, so I did notice there weren't that many women, and if we're going to stick on the the women train here, I thought we'd play a little F, Marry, Kill with female Disney characters.
Oh,
so
we're so going to be canceled. I'm down.
So yeah, might as well, right? So surprisingly, there's quite a few things. If you just type it into Google, there's no shortage of this. So I thought we could decide: do we want to go new Disney characters, or we want to go with the classics?
I don't know any Disney characters. I guess I know Elsa and I know Minnie. Who else?
Well, there's two categories. We can go with the classics, which I thought the classics would be good for our demographic here. And so that was my three choices were Jasmine.
Who's that?
Jasmine from Aladdin,
and she's an F for sure.
Belle from Beauty and the Beast, or you're gonna love this last one, AJ. I see you already shaking your head. Jessica Rabbit.
Ding, 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 ding.
Oh, jeez.
AJ, you got to go first now.
I don't think AJ's allowed.
It speaks for itself. Right. I think everybody already knows the answer to these. you marry Belle. The other two, Jasmine comes in second, and then Jessica Rabbit is.
You're taking down Jessica Rabbit for a night, huh? Mauricio, what do you think?
I think you definitely marry. Yeah, I agree with that. I think you marry Belle, and Jessica. I never saw that one, but I've seen pictures.
You never saw that?
Oh,
geez. You got to go. You got to ask you got to go sit down and watch it with your kids now.
Does anybody disagree with my synopsis?
Yes,
that's the real question. You do. Okay, I'm now. It's because you want to marry her because she's a princess and she has a whole castle and everything else like that. That actually makes sense.
No, Jasmine's a boss, man. Jasmine, out of all the princesses in Disney, I mean, she's super rich. Well, not even that. Like, she was a boss. Like, she took care. She got shit done. That's the type of girl, in my opinion, that I want to marry.
Yeah, and she's also a princess, so she's got a kingdom. So she's super rich.
She is a princess, but they all end up like. I mean, Jessica Rabbit doesn't end up like a princess. Why she's designated the F in this, but Belle ends up a princess too in the end. Like, they all end up princesses. Like, it doesn't matter who you pick.
She does, but not if you marry her. But that's not true with Jasmine, because Jasmine, she's a princess already. So if you marry her, you still get it. But Belle,
true. That wasn't my reasoning.
That is the best point AJ has made all day.
Dang right.
Jay, are you going to answer or what?
I'm just scrolling my Facebook feed. I don't know any of these characters.
The answers aren't in there, Jay. Just come out, answer the question.
So all I know, I can't imagine. I can imagine Jessica Rabbit. So I'll give that the F. Belle, you said, was Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah,
she seems like a good person then. So I would marry her. And who was left?
Jasmine.
I don't know who Jasmine is.
There you go, Jay. There you go, Jay.
Who pulled this up?
Jay.
Oh, jeez.
Well, it is pretty funny that Jay's like, I don't know anything, but I know what Jessica Rabbit looks like.
Everybody knows what Jessica Rabbit looks like.
All right, AJ, I made you go first on the question, so I'll let you go first in the plug. What do you got to plug for us?
Since this is our last episode that any women will ever watch, I think, please go check out. I'm going to stick with the newsletter. Why not? The newsletter. Check it out, everybody. We've been putting it out once a week. So that's it.
You say we're going to get canceled, AJ, but when I type this into Google, there are quite a few more lists of the princes and men of the sexiest men from Disney. There are quite a few more lists than women. So I'm just saying.
That's okay. No, that's fine. We can do that. We can do it with men, just not women.
Mauricio, what do you got to plug for us?
I have landed on 2 weeks from Friday. I am doing my my asset protection masterclass for those of you who buy the book, Legal Strategies for Everyone. You buy the book, drop me a DM. You'll get an exclusive invite to probably a 2 to 3 hour masterclass on asset protection, all the way from beginner, intermediate, and beyond.
Did you respond to the person who put the comment on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I responded to all 13, but I think we've only gotten emails, addresses back from, I think, 7 or 8. So there's still 4 or 5 of you out there that won the book, but have not provided your information. So please go back to that episode or just DM me and give me your address so I can get you a...
Well, somebody in the last episode said, how do I sign up for your masterclass? I bought the book. So make sure you go respond to that.
Perfect. I didn't see that. Perfect. Thank you, Jay.
Jay, you got anything to plug?
I will say that regarding the getting canceled, I have a friend here in Sarasota. She and I are kind of the economist people. Whenever Sarasota Real Estate Investor Association wants to do a data dump, an economics class or whatever, they call the two of us and we tag team. And I convinced her to listen to the episode from a week or two ago, and I asked her how it was, and she said it was great till I got to the guy talking about the Canadian whack-off game. So,
well, so if you want to go watch Jay and this the friend of his tag team a dump, then go check him out. All right.
I didn't plug anything yet.
Yeah, I assumed you were plugging that the data dump with the tag team and the all of that.
Well, so now I'm going to.
I thought you were plugging your gal, right?
Okay, so now I am going to plug that. So Christine and I will be presenting at the Sarasota RIA Wednesday, May 15th. So next Wednesday, May 15th. It's a lunchtime meeting. We normally get over 100 people in the room. So. And we get some big names in the room also. Some very
AJ, you're going to be in Sarasota? Wow, that's big.
Some very famous people sometimes are in that room. So
Jay has invested enough money with AJ for him to make an investor trip out to.
Yeah, he doesn't fly to Florida. So come join us at the Sarasota RIA May 15th to hear Christine and I talk about the economy.
How humid is it going to be on May 15th in Sarasota?
It's low 90s these days with pretty high humidity. It's getting up there. It's not fun anymore.
All right. Well, as always, I'm going to plug my Jasmine, Badass Investor. Check her out on Instagram. Check her out on YouTube. She's churning out the memes. So a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of laughter, and also go check out Conference Connect. If you're a speaker, go put your hat in the ring there. Sign up for a profile if you want people to come find you at your next upcoming conference, or if you're just looking for a conference to speak at. All right. I don't know about you guys, but my 0 carb, 0 sugar drink is all gone. Mauricio, did you finish it?
Look at that. 2 episodes gone.
Well
2 episodes.
Well done. And AJ seems pretty hydrated. Skin's glowing. So he did a good job there too.
I've squirmed enough for this episode, definitely.
Well, hopefully we will be back next week if my wife doesn't cancel us. But in that case, we will see you next Tuesday.
See you guys.